Now, last week, we celebrated the birth of the leader of the women of the world, Sayyida Fatima alayhi salam. Now, since Hadith Kisa identifies the relationship in this beautiful narration through her, identifying her roles as a daughter, wife, and mother, today we would like to honor this amazing woman, the best female to have ever walked the earth, our topmost role model, and our beloved mother, the Lady of Light, Bibi Fatima alayhi salam. We want to honor her by brainstorming about what is it that we can emulate from her as daughters, wives, and mothers. Now, to help me do just that, I am joined today in the studio by Sister Nishat Bimani. Nishat is a high school maths teacher. And we also have with us Sister Nida Mirsarabi, a clinical supervisor, relationship therapist, and a psychologist. So we are in good hands. And we also have with us, joining from Vancouver in Canada, we have with us Sister Zehra Rizwan Sayani. Zehra is an Islamic speaker. Welcome, ladies. Salamun alaikum. Happy Wiladat Day to all of you, even though we celebrated last week, but we are still celebrating this occasion, auspicious occasion. So if we start straight away, and I'll go to you, Nida, we say Sayyida Fatima is the most superior of the women to ever walked. What is it that makes her so superior in your view?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Allahumma salli ala Fatimatan wa abiha wa ba'laha wa baniha wa sirr al-musta'dir fiha ba'adadin ma ahata bihi ilmuk. Thank you very much for such a great questions, because it makes me in the first place think that how I can summarize my knowledge, my limited knowledge about such a character. How I can describe Bibi Fatima in a way that to share with our respectable audience that why she's Sayyidatun Nisa al-Alameen, why she's superior. I think from any dimensions we look at this character as a human being and as a woman, we just find extraordinary examples of the roles she was just offering to people around her and taking responsibilities as a woman, as a human being. Obviously, when we look at her as a human being, we can see act of kindness, we can see selflessness, we can see how she was generous, how she could stand with fairness, how she was taking side of victims and support them, and how at the same time she was offering love and care and kindness, not just to her own family or close member of families or dear ones, but also to strangers.
Absolutely. Okay, we will come and look at her individual qualities, inshallah, as we move on. But Nishat, for you, what does it stand out? Because, you know, since childhood, we have this really special relationship, and we feel the love and connection, and she's our mother figure. But I think with each person, we have a special connection with her. What is it that stands out for you? What is it that connects you to her?
So before I answer that question, I think I'd like to answer on the superiority of Sayyida Fatima alayhi salam, and that is that the Prophet had to do a mi'raj to get to the news of him being able to conceive Bibi Fatima alayhi salam. I mean, what's more evidence do we need of superiority, first of all? My connection with her, in many folds, you know, as I grow older, as my responsibilities change, I think I have made some sort of connection with her roles, with her attitude maybe as well. Not just like Sister Nida said, towards my own people, but also how I apply myself to work, you know, how I am with people I've just met, you know. So I think it's an ever-changing role. I don't think it expires, you know, her connection doesn't expire. It's continuously there with us, no matter what role we put ourselves as women.
Absolutely. Before I just come to you, Sister Zahra, you know, just to mention, like for me, you know, I have my own personal connections with her, and what, like you say, it's changing as life changes, and different, you know, you grow as a person and you see new aspects of her that you probably didn't connect with last year because things happen in your life and then suddenly you are thinking differently. But I mean, one of the things I think I recently felt very strongly is I lost my dad recently, and he had this really deep connection with Bibi Fatima. And I remember that any kind of problems or any kind of issues that would happen in our lives, and we would call him and say, Dad, can you pray for us? And he would say, you know, Bibi will handle everything. Leave it to Bibi. She will handle everything. She's always been there for us. And even though we always heard that years on, it did not really strike. You know, it didn't. There was a new angle to it when we lost him, because I think when he was sick, we were sitting there and thinking, gosh, Bibi, he has so much trust in you, you know, that whatever happened, he only ever called out to you. And then obviously when you know, we lost him, an initial thought was, why did that happen? Because, you know, he trusted you. And then you start thinking and you start reflecting, and there is such a new avenue that comes out of it, and your faith and connection with her and the understanding of what she means, and by her being there for you isn't just about, I want this, give it to me, and I want that, giving that, but what she embodies, you know, and I think we can go a lot deeper into that. But like I think, you know, you reminded me when you said that, Nisha, that I think it is so evolving and it's so changing as we grow as human beings. Now, Sister Zahra, what is it that, in your view, you know, makes her such a superior person? I mean, we know so many qualities of her, but sometimes we hear the same thing over and over again. And I think, you know, sometimes I feel like maybe we don't do so much justice to this woman, because we hear a few things about her and we don't really understand what makes her so superior. So what do you think makes her so superior? We can't hear Sister Zahra.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah,
thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. First of all, assalamu alaikum to everybody over there and to all the people that are watching. And, you know, heartiest congratulations and felicitations on the birth of Bibi Fatima Zahra, salamullahi alayha, to everyone. I would actually like to start off by saying that, you know, when you asked me this question about superiority, I think like how we have not understood and been able to decode Laylatul Qadr as yet. The personality and the life of Bibi Fatima Zahra is such that, you know, we will never be able to, in our lives, be able to decode her, because as we keep on learning and as we keep on growing, there is something that from her life, you know, makes us ponder and think and go deep. And again, I completely agree with what Sister Nishad said, that, you know, superiority, for me, you know, the word also is a little smaller, you know, to describe Bibi Fatima Zahra. But what more would be that, you know, Rasulullah had to go for Mi'raj, you know, to be able to get Bibi Fatima Zahra. And he had to fast, and, you know, he had to cleanse himself to be able to get that gift of Bibi Fatima. But I think what made her the most superior was that her connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was what is the most superior thing about her. That she herself, Khude Zahra, was that she labeled herself as the Kaniz of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And she was the most submissive, you know, to what Allah wanted. That's what made her the most superior person. And when I learned from the life of Bibi Fatima Zahra, this is what keeps me, you know, reminding myself that my access point should be Tawheed and Allah. his raza, his, marzi should be what I should be looking at, and then everything else should center around that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's beautiful, and I think that is so important to really raise, because a lot of times one of the unfortunate thing is that when we are talking about Bibi Fatima, and obviously we are seen as Shia Muslims to be very biased, I mean, we go deep into this talk about how superior she is and how much we love her, and we ignore, of course, other women of the household of the Prophet. And when you say something like, there was a special reason how she was born, she's the mother of Imams, we are not touching on the qualities, or to a person who does not understand or does not believe, on what is it that as a person that you can see, that me and you can relate to. But I think it's so important that, like, while we are talking about her living in our household, whereby she's the mother of Imam, she's the wife of Imam, she's the daughter of the Prophet, but it is that connection with God, and that's something that we can translate into our own lives, that our love for Ahlulbayt is there, no doubt about it. But as long as you don't form that absolute love with your Lord, and you don't fall in love with him in a way that full, complete submission, you cannot rise to the ranks that, of course, not at the level of Bibi Fatima, but that's, I think, what is so amazing about her. Now, that is the woman, that is the person. Now, we want to talk about each aspects of her life. As a daughter, Nishad, the very Prophet himself called her Ummu Abiha, the mother of father. And what kind of a father? The Prophet, the best human being to have walked the earth. What is it that she did as a daughter that gave her this status?
So we've read this again and again. We've heard it from members, Bibi Fatima went through a lot of things in her very young age. And the things that she did as a daughter for the Prophet was as if a mother was doing them for the Prophet. So we hear things like when she was only 5 years old and Bibi Khadija salamullahi alayhi passed away, and if it was other children, they get traumatized, they become victims of sorrow and stuff. But when we look at this period in Bibi Fatima's life, although it was a very sad period, she was the one that looked after the Prophet, even in this, this sad period in her life. And then she grows up and she sees the Prophet, being ridiculed, him coming home tired and, disheartened, and she's the one who tends to his wounds. And so all the qualities that she had, they were very nurturing. And it is a mother who nurtures, right? So I think that is why the Prophet called Bibi Fatima Ummi Abiha. But also not just the Prophet, we have seen many people around in Prophet's life. We have heard Aisha say that she had never seen the Prophet in full glory as she did when he saw Bibi Fatima and how he greeted her, right? So I think that is why the Prophet had so much respect for Bibi Fatima, because of, one, her superiority, and second also because of the things that she got up to, the roles that she took over, not just as a daughter but as a mother to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Now, Nida, you are the psychologist here. When things like this happen in childhood, like the loss of a mother at the age of 5, I mean, this is a big issue and topics that we are hearing. I mean, we've heard lately the story of Harry and Meghan, and about how much the death of his mom affects in him, and all the concepts about how much counseling you need, and the surrounding. Here we're talking about this woman. Not only has she lost her mother, but like Nishad said, all these other issues going on. It is very easy to say that she was not like us. She was the daughter of the Prophet, but she was specially made by Allah. She had these qualities from God. So she did not go through the emotions that we would go through, that she was not like us. Is that justification fair enough?
I would believe that no matter how much she was significant as a character, but also in terms of emotional expressions, we hear that how she went through bereavement with sadness about losing her father, for example. Obviously, as a child, that kind character would be very upset and very sad to lose her mother. However, we have many significant characters even in our times that we see they come from orphans backgrounds, they come from trauma in their childhood or even later on in their lives, but then they turned it to something for their growth, and not just for them as like one single person or human beings, but also to offer that life experience to others. We have like people who learn through their difficult lives or challenges in their lives, and even in psychology it tends to be a theory in psychology, and obviously when we have a meaning for difficulties or challenges, then and tends to be a positive meaning, then obviously we come out of it stronger and more powerful, and we build more resilience.
Yeah. What would be your message to people who at a young age, or people looking after children who have lost parents or any other bereavement at this age, to feel like life dealt them a very hard hand already, and that they feel sometimes so confined and feel like they have not started out at a good footing, and they have less chances of succeeding in life.
Yeah.
With the example of Fatima, and obviously the most superior, the leader of the world, but would you say that actually that enhanced her ability to become who she became? Because at a very young age she had to deal with this thing, and it sort of like, would you say that it affected in any manner who she became, positively, negatively, in whatever means?
I think to answer these questions, we have two ways to go. One way is looking at Bibi Fatima, Hazrat Fatima, Sayyidatun Nisa al-Alamin, as a supreme characters, which we all believe that she's Sayyidatun Nisa al-Alamin, the first woman who's entering the paradise, and she's just significant, and we need to read a lot to just learn about character. And just by being here, it was a reminder for me that still I need to learn a lot about Bibi Fatima, and I'm not able to describe her qualities as I should and as she deserves. On the other hand, we look at her from an angle that it be easier for me as a human being to access that character and that quality, to just find similarities she had with other human beings. So here I can relate with Bibi Fatima as a child who lost her mother, but also she's Abiha. So she's mothering and caring, showing care and love to her father, who lost his lovable wife. They had loving relationship, and then obviously he's left with a daughter, young age, and in that situation when having girls wasn't any advantage.
Yeah.
So basically these characters in all aspects makes her father be somehow proud of her. And obviously she just makes her fathers happy, because she's showing love, she's showing care, but also she's creating some happiness around her father after that significant loss. And we can hear about stories about this loving father and daughter's relationship, which it was beautiful.
Absolutely. So instead of holding on to the negativity of what you've lost in life, you focus on the positivity of what you have and how you can make it more beautiful as you go along. Sister Zahra, now, when we talk about Fatima's role as a daughter, oftentimes we are always thinking about our phases in life before we become mothers ourselves, we become, wives, and that you are there with your parents, and how, we often, the issue is when we go to mosque, the lectures you hear are towards younger people, or especially our teenagers. How do you talk to your mother? How do you talk to your father? How did Bibi Fatima? But we don't often talk about when we've moved on with our own lives, how do we now care for our parents? Because this is the time when they probably need us the most. As they are aging and we have got our lives moving on, how much do you think a role are we able to play realistically in looking after our parents, and what should we be doing? Sister,
it's a great question.
Yeah.
And yes, obviously, we have to play that role where we are obviously daughters to begin with, and now we're in a situation where we have kids of our own, and we need to play the balance. I would say the best thing that we can do is strike a healthy balance between, taking care of our aging parents, yet at the same time, being the mom to our kids. And the best part would be if we all are together. At that same time, how the community and how our environments have changed, that we would like to live, as a nucleus family. We would like to live, just husband, wife, and kids, and then the parents can live on their own. But wouldn't it be better if we all are living together so our kids can see how we are interacting with our parents, how we're taking care of them, so that instead of, having to repeat in the lectures and go to the mosque and our youngsters seeing that you have to behave yourself, or you don't have to talk to your parents in that voice or all that, they're actually seeing a person actually doing all that. So if I am living with my parents, or if I'm living with my, or my in-laws are living, we're all living together, the best would be, my kids see how I'm interacting with them. Their parents as well, their grandparents as well. So, the best would be to strike that healthy balance of having them in our lives, living with us together, so we can take care of our parents and our kids at the same time. And again, they learn through what they're seeing their, role models are doing.
Sister Zara, just an added on question there, especially in our communities, it's very common for us to expect that, as a woman, you would be more taking care of your in-laws, your husband's parents rather than your own. But there is a difference here. Your husband's parents are really your husband's responsibility, whereas as a woman, your parents are your responsibility. If not a responsibility, your Jannah lies under your own mother's feet. But as a culture, we don't allow our women to have that opportunity oftentimes, because you're supposed to look after your in-laws and not your own parents. How do we go about making this more fair?
Again, a great question. And I would like to actually add over here that the understanding between the spouses is very important. So this needs to be laid down very well ahead in advance, that my parents are going to be my responsibility, your parents are your responsibility, and they could be, vice versa as well. I know our cultures have played this role of segregating, that once you get married, you move into your in-laws' house with your husband, and that's it, you forget your parents. And I think that is one of the aspects of our cultures that I say that I hate, that we can actually get rid of. We can try to bring in our own ways of living. Obviously, we can say, okay, this is the amount of time that I'll be obviously giving at home to your parents, and this is the amount of time that I'll be giving to my parents. And I see this happening in a lot of Western communities and with them, that, the lady says, okay, I'm going to meet my parents, or my parents are coming over, they're going to be staying with us for this amount of time. And again, this all is very, very dependent on both the spouses having this conversation way ahead, so that they can lay down the groundwork that this is what we will do to keep each other's parents happy, comfortable, and in our lives as well, so that our kids can learn from this experience, and they can have the interaction with their grandparents and learn from their lives and their experiences, which is very important.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're not advocating by any chance that, it should be one-sided, but, there has to be an equality, and you have to look at both sets of parents in an equal manner, which I think increasingly is sort of happening. But it's still sometimes shunned upon slightly by the community, and I think we need to get out of that mindset, which brings me to the question, Nishad, that I personally, and maybe it's my lack of knowledge, I personally haven't seen any relation, any mention of baby Fatima and her in-laws. I mean, we don't read anywhere. We know that they lived in a nucleus family. We know that because we hear of the accounts of the Kisa and all the ayat here. So there was a nucleus family. If the in-laws were there, we don't hear anything about it. Now, what does that mean? Is it just the history that we're not aware of, or was the importance less, that it has not been as significantly mentioned as the nucleus family has been?
That's a really tough question, Sakina. So when I, was looking up things about Bibi Fatima alayhi salam, and I was, dwelling on the life of Bibi Fatima alayhi salam, again, I wasn't able to find much about her relationship with her in-laws. But then having said that, there isn't much about many holy personalities whose in-laws have not been talked about. Yes, we do talk about the in-laws of Imam Ali alayhi salam because he was the prophet and he was, Sayyidah Zahra's father. The only thing that I have read in my research so far about the in-laws of Bibi Fatima, first of all, I know that Imam Ali had brothers, Hazrat Aqil, and there were many people that were in the life of Imam Ali at the time when he got married to Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam. But the only thing that in my research, my very limited research, have found is that when Imam Ali and Bibi Fatima alayhi salam got married and they moved into their house, that Imam Ali's mum was still alive. I'm not sure if this is still 100%. She was still alive, and Imam Ali, as the husband, he took it upon him as his responsibility to split the chores of the house, to split the areas of the house that belonged to Sayyidah Fatima and to his mom. That's what.
That's interesting.
And I thought I'd mention that it was in the Tahzib al-Ihkam, Volume 3.
Okay. If Sister Zahra or Sister Nida, you want to come in on this one, if you have any references, you're more than welcome to come on this subject of in-laws, because personally, like I said, I couldn't find anything, and there's huge, obviously, emphasis on Bibi Fatima's household, and that's obviously because it's a prophet's household. But also, everything is not just because they were imams and they were prophets. I mean, they were human beings. Allah brought them in the form of a human being because they are our role models, and it's not good enough to say that they were special and therefore we no, this doesn't apply to us. It applies to us. Every aspect of their life applies to us, and like you mentioned, I think I'll bring in Sister Zahra because she mentioned the concept of nucleus family versus joint families. Now, joint family doesn't seem to be a tradition of any of our Ahlulbayt. Sister Zahra, isn't that correct?
Sorry, could you repeat yourself, Sister Sakina? I couldn't hear you on the last portion.
I'm just mentioning that, since you talked about the need for us to possibly have joint families, because when we live in nucleus families, we don't have the grandparents figure. But we don't have any examples from any of the lives of our Ahlul Bayt where we see that there was any system of joint families. Of course, we hear of the best grandfather, the Holy Prophet. He didn't live with Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. He used to come to them. He would take the kids with him. But we don't see. I mean, we see the story of Sayyidah Zainab. I don't know, is there any such reference in history that our Ahlul Bayt lived in joint families?
This is a little, I wouldn't say funny or humorous, but our world has become, and with us, I don't know about others, but in our South Asian cultures, this family drama that we see on soap that we watch, that has brought a lot of mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, saas, bhu, and all that. But yes, obviously we don't hear because the history wasn't actually focused on mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationships and all. And that is because back then, and even in today's day and age, it's just about human nature, how we're supposed to adapt and live in harmony with everybody that is around us. Whether it's, you learn how Sayyida Fatima was living with her stepmom, and how Sayyida Fatima was living with her mother-in-law, Bibi Fatima bint Asad. I just need to bring into this, and I needed to add on to that conversation that Sister Nishat was having, that yes, we don't hear a lot about in history because the history books are not, they were more focused on how Islam was progressing and how things were happening than focusing on just the personal life of Bibi Fatima, Imam Ali, and Bibi Fatima bint Asad and all. But I just need to bring in that if we're learning from the life of Bibi Fatima, we need to understand that if she's the most superior and if she's Sayyidatun Nisa'il Alameen, then we will not hear anything that, oh, how it was, because if first, she is living with Bibi Fatima bint Asad. Who's Bibi Fatima bint Asad? She's not only just the mother of Imam Ali alayhi salam, but she was the one who, along with Hazrat Abu Talib, was had done the kafalat of Rasulullah. So she is now not only her mother-in-law, but she is actually a grandmother figure to Bibi Fatima. So we will never hear any, discrepancies happening between the two, because obviously at the age of what Bibi Fatima was married at, she was way mature for her intellect, and we cannot understand her intellect and her the characteristics that she had. So we will never hear anything in the books of history coming out like that.
Okay,
and yes, coming back to
yeah.
where, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, fair enough. I think that's a fair point, but it's just sometimes this is an interesting subject because we don't see any mention, even when we're talking of the households. And that is just to say that, there isn't one unique system. Of course, for a personality like Fatima, we don't expect her to be having any kind of arguments and stuff, but just to say that, there doesn't have to be any one system that's superior to the other. It's mostly, our relationship and care and love between us. So it isn't always about whether we want to, live separately, we want to live in a joint family, but moreover the characteristics and the burden on the woman, I feel, because like she mentioned, from the subcontinental, cultures, is like you're an evil woman if you say you're not going to live with your mother-in-law. And I think it is time that we don't equate a woman's ability or a woman's position or a woman's goodness to basic things like that, because there's a lot more to a woman, and we see this in the example of Bibi Fatima. Now, final question on her role as a daughter before we move to the more interesting wife role. And Sister Nida, for those of us who don't have our parents anymore in the world, what do we emulate? What do we learn from Bibi Fatima on what is our continuous duty towards our parents?
I personally think that after we lose our parents, like I lost my parents in this life, they move to the next life. So still they living, but in different alam. From alam dunya, they move to alam barzakh. So this is my beliefs. I know there are some audience may think differently, and I respect that. But obviously, for me, that's not ending a relationship. For me, that's a start of a new relationship with my parents. So still I can do good behalf them, still I can show kindness to others behalf them, still I can, if I believe in, for example, reciting Quran, our holy book, and we think that this is something good to do, I can do that behalf them. I can do some charity work behalf them. So basically, and I can speak with them. I can still connect to them. But it's just how much I'm accepting this reality in my life and how I relate to it.
Which is also a process. It doesn't happen overnight.
Of course,
it's a process.
It's a process of bereavement, and it's more or less all people's going through the similar types of process. It can be very painful at the beginning, and tearful, and sadness, and then obviously we go through, and then we build a relationship. Either that relationship would be me suffering for the rest of my life because physically I don't have them around me, or I can relate to their gap in terms of, and how I can relate to this loss when physically they're not around.
Absolutely. And like, they say that, your father is the root of the tree that you are, and as long as you are there, you are a manifestation of him, and therefore whatever we do in lives and stuff, and we dedicate to our parents, that way they continue living in life, even though they are not there. And there's obviously a lot more we could talk about, but let's move on to the role of Bibi Fatima as an exemplary wife. Nishat. Yes.
Before you go to the role of I have been part of a network of women who have expressed that their children are not comfortable with the physical love that grandparents show towards their children. Okay. And I was quite shocked and saddened by it, although I respect that some children might not be the touchy-feely people, and that love can be expressed in different ways. But with Hadith Kisa, we see the love there is between a family. We see Bibi Fatima, and there was a question that you asked about how we as women in this world can cope with all the other things that we have to do. Bibi Fatima, she cooked for the poor, she cooked for her family, she taught women, so it's not like she had ample of time to do things and be always there for her family, but she was. At the time of Hadith Kisa, she was very busy doing her own chores at home, and then she, her father had that relationship with her and her husband where he could have, whenever he wished to visit his daughter, visit the house of Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam. And not only that, when he visited, the grandchildren would run towards their grandfather saying, "Oh, I can smell the scent of our grandfather. Is he here?" And they get under the kisa with him. Imam Ali alayhi salam, the husband of Bibi Fatima, now that he's the husband, he could have said, "You know what, I'll give them the time. No, I should respect that he's the..." No, but he gets under the kisa as well, And then Bibi Fatima thinks, "Oh, my whole family is in there. I should get in there as well." She gets in there as well. So this love for grandparents has to come, like Sister said, from ourselves, from within, right? If we show that loving our grandparents and accepting love from our grandparents in whatever form that they want to show it is acceptable, they will learn it, they will see it, and they will also want the same for themselves. And I think, no, I'm not just saying it, Islam is not just saying it, there are research after research about the benefits of having grandparents in the house and the effect that they have towards their grandchildren.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, one of the things that I always think is, if you are unhappy, maybe you are unhappy with the way you were raised, because if these people raised you, now you're questioning their parenting towards your children. So unless you're really unhappy about who you are as a person, which would reflect why you would question their... And that's not to say there should not be boundaries. Of course there's got boundaries. Parents have a role and grandparents have their own role. But absolutely a valid point, I think, for you to raise, that increasingly I think we are moving too much. Sometimes, sometimes from subcontinental cultures are negative, but sometimes the Western cultures, when we get too much into that, are also negative. And again, it's about the balance, keeping all the right things in place. Let's move on to Bibi Fatima's role as a wife. Nishat, she was an exemplary wife. We hear about this in, everywhere. What made her such an exemplary wife?
Where do we begin? They said that there was no match for her in the whole of the Arab continent. There was nobody that could have been the perfect match for Sayyidah Fatima. And that is because of her status, her superior status, right? And we know that the only match could have been, and these are the words of the Prophet, it could just be Imam Ali alayhi salam. As a wife, we start from her spouse selection to her wedding to her marriage. There is so much that we have been listening to. I don't even have to say, there's so much that we've been listening to about her role as a woman as a wife towards her husband that is, so selfless. Again, it is that selflessness, that connection with Allah that we've all spoken about so far, that made her the wife that she was, right? So we, her wedding, we see how that beautiful dress that she had for her wedding, she gives away, all in the name of Allah. I don't know if I have it in me to give away. I still have my wedding dress. It's been over 20 years, still have my wedding dress, It's that connection I have with that dress and that event. Maybe, her connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and her solidarity with social justice, with social issues were higher than her own.
But also probably her connection with Imam Ali himself. Because if you are marrying somebody who you think is the best thing ever out there, it doesn't matter how you get married, what you are wearing, what you take with you, because your focus is on that person that is to become your life partner. But unfortunately, we don't have too many of Imam Alis around us, so it's very hard to find a spouse like...
to have a wife like Fatima.
To have a wife like Fatima. And sisters, let me bring you here in this question. Can we realistically say that we women can become like Bibi Fatima when they aren't husbands like Imam Ali?
Yes, we can.
Go on, tell us how.
Okay, so let me tell you this. So if we're emulating to be like Bibi Fatima, again, I'll go back to my first point that I mentioned is our access point should be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His ubudiyah, becoming his kaneez. If we keep Tawheed and Allah the center focus, our whole lives can, work around that. So I can take care of my kids in a way because I'm doing it for the raza of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm helping my, parent, I'm helping my in-laws, I'm helping my husband, I'm doing everything that I need to do is because my primary focus is that I have to make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happy and what he has asked me to do, whether it's, having silay rahim, whether it's doing, my ibadat, everything. I can be Fatima and I can try to be like her without having a husband like Ali. And I'm going to just give you one single example is Asiya bint Muzahim. One of the ladies of heaven is Asiya, even though she was married to Fir'aun. So it is within ourselves to cleanse ourselves and bring ourselves to the next level, have that level of taqwa and iman, and we can inshallah be Fatima.
Absolutely, beautiful answer. I think that's amazing. Sister Nida, in today's modern life, of course, everything that Bibi Fatima did and the role she played, they're not unique to her times. I mean, these are the values we can take on for all times. But sometimes it's with the modern times, it becomes difficult for us, even to our younger, daughters, when we explain that how do we translate what her values were, specifically as a wife today, to our lives, because we see things like we hear about how she used to make food and, food plays such a big role. When you read the story of Fatima, constantly you hear about that. She was always cooking. Even when she passed away, we hear about how she prepared the food and she left it for her children. And in today's era, our focus isn't that much on food because there's a lot more intellectual world. Women's roles have changed. Of course, food can also mean care. It doesn't have to be literally food. But what values do you think that we can take away from Bibi Fatima and say as a modern wife today that we can implement in our lives?
As you mentioned earlier, I believe that Bibi Fatima's character is not just valid for one period of time. It's an example for everyone, anywhere and at any place and during any time. Again, I'll go back as everyone mentioned about Hadith Kasai, go back to that kind of loving, caring relationship when Bibi Fatima is calling her children with very positive adjectives. So this builds some self-esteem for a child. This builds some self-confidence for a child. This shows that he or she is loved by her or his parents. And here we have Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, that they both communication is loving, caring, positive adjectives, respect from mothers to the children. So these are things that any human being at any times would love, to feel loved, to be respected, to be called with some positive adjectives. And here is what we hear from Bibi Fatima and how she communicates with her young children, full of respect, full of love, positive communications. And also we see there is communication. It's not just a significant order. Now you should go so and so place. Your granddad is there. No, like it's just calling them, hello, how are you? Some positive adjectives. So kind of introductions with positive adjectives, and then moves on to this is the situation, explaining for them what's the situations.
Absolutely. The communication, I think how we project ourselves to the children is so important. And I want to move on to her role as a mother. But just before that, just a quick question for Sister Zahra. Sister Zahra, when we talk about the relationship of Imam Ali and Bibi Fatima, and again, this is the most wonderful marriage that is there in history, and we, in our own marriages, we always talk about this relationship. I think, in my perspective, one of the things that I see her as, the best role she played as a wife is this amazing love and loyalty that she has to Imam Ali. When we hear about at the end of her life, and when, the door was thrown on her, and her protection of Imam Ali, and just her 100% commitment to Imam Ali, not questioning his position, and loving him through whatever situations they went through, happier times during the time of the Prophet, difficult times after the death of the Prophet. Can we say that this was because he was her Imam, and that she had been granted this responsibility to take care of the Imamat? Was it mostly because of that, or do you here see the love of a wife for her husband?
Yes, it is definitely one of the reasons, and this is my personal opinion and suggestion, that the love for Bibi Fatima, for Imam Ali, was obviously first and foremost because he was the Imam. But the reason why she stood up and why she exercised her right to, take care of, because she was taking care of the wilaya, right? That Imam Ali is the wali, and he has to be given his right. But again, being a wife as well, this is what Sayyida Fatima is teaching us, that if you are loyal and you love your husband, you will make sure that nobody, goes and takes your husband's rights away. So in today's day and age, the love, the loyalty comes in, and we're living in very difficult times. You don't know what might happen. So if you have to stand up and talk and take care of your husband's right, you have to do it. And I believe that the love and the loyalty does come in because if you have that loving and caring husband, obviously you will also give in your 100%. And that's how marriages are supposed to be. You give the love, have the least of amount of expectations. This is what I tell my kids as well, that have the least amount of expectations in the relationship. But when you have the least expectations, you get the most. Absolutely. Right? So to have a perfect marriage, she gave in her 100%. She wasn't expecting anything back, but obviously him being Imam Ali was also at his best, that I have to give in 100%. So this is how perfect marriages are made.
And obviously, I think, one of the things that makes this unique is the status of both of them. Because sometimes I know when we talk about marriages and spouse selection, we don't put as much emphasis on status, and I don't mean worldly status, as in who you are as a person, but having certain status because of which there is mutual respect, I think is very important. Because, like we recite in our, wedding things, if she was, Fatima, then he was, they both had equal level of honor. And therefore, there was, apart from being a husband and wife, there was already a recognition right in the front that, he's the best man out there and she's the best woman out there. So even before love, there was the respect, which I think is extremely important in any marriage. Yeah. And of course, through history and through small incidences we hear, there's the tenderness, I think, which we see between the two, which is often displayed in very few words. But I think, sometimes when we run after all the talk about love doesn't even, it means different thing to different people, but it's that tenderness that is there between them, which I think makes it so special.
It also depends on what it is that you have fallen in love with that person. And so that Fatima had the greatest of marriage examples in the Prophet and Sayyidah Khadija alayhi salam. She saw what Bibi Khadija did for her husband, so and she had the best of the teachings, so obviously she was going to learn from there. And then again, as we've said, that Imam Ali, the status, she saw the status, Bibi Khadija saw the status of Rasulullah, and Bibi Fatima saw the status of Imam Ali alayhi salam, And then, like we've said, it's not necessary that you have to have Rasulullah or Imam Ali for a husband. You can have Fir'aun for a husband and still be Asiya.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And of course also, Imam Ali watching how Bibi Fatima was treated by the Prophet. So sometimes even when we are talking about parenting now, the respect with which we treat our own children is how people will pick up on that. So if you don't have respect for your own children, and then you're expecting when your child is married, that someone else to give them that respect, that's problematic,
not
isn't
just
it?
For the child, but for your husband as well.
Yeah.
The relationship you have with your husband at home is the relationship, maybe they'll have the same, but they will, that's what the marriage of meaning of marriage will be for your kids. So if you're going to have this relationship with your spouse that is a beautiful relationship, your children will want that, and they will do everything in their power to make that sure that they get that relationship from their spouses.
Absolutely. This is a wide topic, and it's a topic by itself, which I'm sure with Sister Nida next time we can have her as a psychologist, because there's a lot of aspects of what we portray and what children should and should not pick up, because sometimes for example even being too submissive can have negative connotations for but that's a completely different discussion. Now as a mother, of course she is the mother of the 12 Imams, and gosh, what kind of children you are talking of? Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, Bibi Zainab, Bibi Kulsum. I mean, it just gives you goosebumps even when you talk about these personalities. What is it that she did as a mother that should stand out for us and say, this is something we can implement, Nida?
So I think as a foundation, obviously respect, love, care, but also messages that even after her stayed with her children and brought them to the quality that more or less we're aware of, a quality of a very good relationship between siblings after even losing their mothers, and even also their fathers, so Imam Ali. So we can hear about Bibi Zainab and Imam Hussein's and the children, and even here there is a bit of kind of relationship between Bibi Zainab and Bibi Rubab, mother of Imam Hussein's wife. So if in terms of in-laws, I think perhaps Bibi Zainab was showing whatever she learned from her own mother. So really good quality relationship, and in really difficult time when even the basic needs haven't been met, and they're thirsty, they're hungry, they have young children, it's battles, there's wars going on, they don't have safety in there, but how much they're there for each other, how much they support each other, how much they put themselves before the other ones to take the challenge away from their siblings or from nieces, nephews, in-laws, and everyone.
Okay, we have very little time left. We'll just come to you, Sister Zara, and then finish off with Sister Nishad. So, Sister Zara, when we talk about parenting today, there's huge challenges. I mean, the influences of the social media and other factors out there. is huge, and I think there is no parents, there wouldn't be a parent who wouldn't be lying by saying that, you know, we're not worried about how our children turn out today with the challenges that are out there today. What in your mind, in your view, is the one or two things we can pick up from the mothering of baby Fatima that we can implement? Very quickly, please.
A lot to learn from that. The life of Bibi Fatima as a mother, and all the aspects of her life. One basic thing that I would point up, like very importantly, is selflessness. So if we keeping the family involved in the community. So two things that I want is, one is having, first of all, Tawheed, a very thorough concept of Tawheed, and showing it to our kids so that they can pick up from my character, from my habits, that this is what my mom is doing. And example from the life of Bibi Fatima, you know, when she would sit down on the prayer mat, she would pray for her neighbors and her near dear ones. And then this is what Imam Hassan picked up on and said, why don't you pray for us first? And then, you know, just showing the kids what needs to be done. If I'm doing something right, then my kids will pick up on it. Sure. If I am just, you know, real life situations, if I'm on my electronic devices more, and if I'm, you know, watching TV more, or if I'm doing something more of, I cannot expect my child to stay away from those things.
Absolutely.
So, you know, what we show them is what they will show us back, because they are mirrors, right? They're seeing what we're doing.
Absolutely. And of course, her fight for justice is, we see Bibi Zainab, Bibi Kulsum picking that up. Now, very final question to you, Sister Nishat, is we've talked about her as a wife and a mother and a daughter, and very quickly, this doesn't limit her to what she is. She is a woman in her own right, and Allah doesn't say she's the best wife or the best daughter. She is Sayyidatun Nisa al-Alamin, the best of the women. You know, what is it about her womanhood that makes her Sayyidatun Nisa al-Alamin?
So, you know, there's this outlook of Bibi Fatima showed that she was very weak, and she was a victim of injustice, and, you know, a homely woman, and only cooked and cleaned for the family, which is what, you know, I'm not putting down these values as a woman, but we've also seen how she fought for wilaya, you know, how she was the first shaheed for wilaya, right? How she stepped out of her house when the need came for social justice. She stepped out of the house for when she wanted to ask for her rights. Today, if a woman goes up to people and asks for her right, she's known as, you know, an outcast, or a troublesome woman. Bibi Fatima did it, and we respect her for that, right? So she wasn't just this victim, but she had so much more to it. She was a teacher. You know, Bibi Fizza has said that she's become a hafiz just by living in that house.
Okay, I mean, there's a lot to talk about, honestly, and you know, she's the best in every aspect, but time is not with us. The biggest takeaway, really, for me from this holy lady is that she fulfilled each of her roles to the highest of degree. She's identified as the highest of the women, and she played a role in every aspect. So this basically means that you don't have to be defined by the role. It can be your own choice. So if you aren't a wife or a mother, for example, you are not any less of a woman. As lovers of this phenomenal lady, we should not judge any women for the roles that they play and want to immerse themselves in. I think what is vital is that whichever role we put ourselves in for, we do it with the love, commitment, and excellence of Sayyidah Fatima, who is our biggest role model. Thank you so much, my guests, for being with me today. Thank you, Sister Zahra. Thank you so much, Sister Nida and Sister Nishat. And thank you all for watching. Inshallah, I'll see you again next week, same time. Khuda Hafiz.
Trust